handouts, and it goes straight after we were on topic 3, World War II, and we ended up with the United Nations. So I'm just going to pick up from there. And if you remember, the League of Nations, what Woodrow Wilson had set in place after World War I to prevent something like World War II, had been a complete failure. All they did was shake their finger and write mean letters, and it didn't stop Hitler from doing what he was doing. So they beefed it up. They realized it didn't have enough power, enough teeth behind it. More people joined this union, and they renamed it the United Nations. So I want to take a minute and just let you know that the United Nations today is more than just a peacekeeping force. They do a lot. They drill wells. They drill wells for people in poor countries. They prevent disease. They give hospitals. There's a whole World Health Organization that when we have things like the Ebola virus outbreak, they are on it and they have plans. So they do a lot of humanitarian efforts just to help people out. And that means that it's not surprising that a lot more nations have joined than just this. Originally, these were the nations that joined, and we'll talk more about this map a little bit later. But today, nearly every country belongs, even Switzerland, who doesn't join anything, but they're there because of the humanitarian efforts. If there was a war vote, they won't vote. But they want to be involved for other reasons. A few countries that are in red and orange at the time I think this was done was Iraq after the Persian Gulf War. You've got North Korea. You've got these outlying people who are kind of have some crazy countries going on. So their member standing in this group is not good. When it comes to conflicting political ideologies, I've been teaching this for years. I am going to give you the very abbreviated version of what makes people think how they should rule a country and what the differences are. This is eventually going to be a diagram with like a plus sign. I have to explain each level first, or each line first. This blue represents government. Where there is a lighter color, there is less government control, and where there's darker, there's more. So at the top, you have political freedom, which is democracy. People can vote. People have the right to travel where they want. You have some right of free speech and free press. No one has 100%. You can't go around doing anything you want. Murder is illegal. But we are somewhere in that light area. In contrast, you have a dictatorship. Now, please know, no leader says, hey, I'm a dictator. Nobody says that. They call themselves king or emperor, or they have whatever title they have. But we label them a dictator. They are dictating what rights these people have. There are no elections. People can't travel freely. Jobs are decided for them. They just don't have a lot of freedom. Next, on the red bar is money. How are the country's finances? We're talking money for the country. How is that handled? Again, the lighter color is less government control, and the darker color is more government control. On the dark side, we get what's called a command economy. We don't use this word. Almost everybody out there uses the term communism. Fine, it's close to command, but it's where the government there's no Ford Motor Company. Nobody would own a big auto manufacturing place like that in a command economy. The government would own it. They're going to determine how many cars are made, what color they're made, who's going to get the cars, how much money it's going to cost to get this. And their whole goal, it sounds awesome, their whole goal is that everybody gets a car. That's the goal behind this. On the other hand is you're going to use the word capitalism. When you get to economics class, we'll be more specific and call it free market. But really, for this course, capitalism is perfectly fine. And that means you own a company with the goal to make a profit. Kind of nice. And there are very few government limitations on what your company can do. Again, nobody gets 100% freedom. You can't go around selling meth in the streets or have a shop selling illegal drugs. There are things you can't do in our country. Some of the things I like For instance, the government says that all cars manufactured today have to have seat belts and airbags. They're not just for the rich people. They can't charge you extra for those things. They say that medicines have to be sealed and labeled and warnings. I kind of like the government taking some of that responsibility off of my shoulder. You could completely disagree with me. Believe me, this country has a lot of different opinions about how much government is too much government. Now, if I put these together, I'm going to show you where some countries fall. Clearly, the United States, we are democratic and we are capitalist. It's not a term, but as far as those two words go, our democracy, our arrow kind of shows that we have limited freedoms. For instance, we don't allow prisoners to vote if they've committed murder, right? We can't trust them to make good decisions. We do revoke freedoms. We don't allow children to vote that are under 18. We do restrict some freedoms. And again, I've already talked about a few of the economic freedoms that we restrict. On the exact opposite side is communism. Communism sounds wonderful on paper. Everybody gets a house, everybody gets a car, everybody gets the clothing they need for the climate they live in, everybody gets food, everybody gets a job. And it sounds perfect, but it's flawed. And we'll come to that in a moment. But on this particular graph, this is about where it would fall in these countries: China, Vietnam, North Korea, and Cuba. I will say this: Vietnam's starting to move that red line over. If one of these countries becomes free soon, I'm going to bet it would be Vietnam would be the first one to become free. But again, that massive government control over businesses. Now, they don't have 100% control. If you're a baker for them during the day, you bake bread, sell bread at their government store, you can come home and bake a cake for somebody's birthday party and make a little money off the side. They're okay with that, as long as it's not too much. If it's too much, you're going to get a visit from the police, and it's not going to be a nice one. And one of the reasons they have such political control in the blue is because they have to stop people from talking out against this. Oh, this government stinks and I hate this government. I wish we were free. They're going to squash that fast. These people disappear in the middle of the night, never to be seen again. In China, we highly suspect that their organs are harvested so that people can pay illegal money to have a kidney transplant, a heart transplant. It's not, and sometimes the cost for that is so awesome that good people disappear simply because they're a donor match. That's what complete political dictatorship control is about. Just so you know, democratic socialism, we're talking about Sweden and Canada, a lot of countries, Norway, France, United Kingdom. There's different levels of this. Almost all of them have freedom. Just the government steps in to help them out a little bit. That's a whole nother class. I don't need to get to that kind of nuance. I will mention fascism. I don't have an example today. It never lasts long. You can't try to control people completely of their belief system, but let them run the companies so that they can make some money. People don't like a little bit of freedom. They like a lot of freedom. And the minute you give them a little bit of freedom, this just never lasts long. They rebel. And so I don't have one for this particular corner. But you get the idea of how democracy and capitalism are pretty much complete opposites of how something is done. And we'll come to this. So I mentioned that on paper, communism sounds awesome, especially if you're poor, oppressed, and uneducated. Because what you don't know if you study anything is that people tend to be lazy and greedy. So if I tell you right now, no matter how hard you work for the rest of the semester, everybody's going to get an A-. Most of you will not work very hard. But I expected that work to be done. So there's a lack of work, which if you're making cars and houses and food and clothes, that could lead to starvation and hypothermia and dying. Your whole apartment buildings could fall down because you didn't work hard enough. Do you see how that's a problem? Additionally, the greediness is in the person controlling it because they have to gather all the stuff and distributed evenly. However, they might want to give the better ones to their friends, or keep a couple extra for themselves, or have the people make a nicer house because I'm the leader. Those types of things, the greediness becomes a problem. That's why this plan sounds good, but it never works because humans can't be trusted. Sorry, we're pretty pathetic. So this is why democracy went out of its way, not just the United States, to see communism as a serious threat. The more people that would jump into this, the more people we had to worry about eventually maybe shooting at us, trying to make us go away, this idea of freedom and democracy. And it became a very scary fight. So I just want to say this. I have a map here to go with this. But basically, as we welcomed these newly freed countries from imperialism to the United Nations, we're like, hey, come on in, join Africa and Asia. We would like you to join our side. And they're like, no, you all stink. You all stink. And we're going to do our own thing. We're not getting messed up in your stuff. But that is so awesome for them. They didn't join the garbage. These countries that were once colonized really decided together to be kind of a third. We call them blocks. We had the Freedom Democratic Bloc. We had the Communist Bloc, and they were just like, we're our own bloc. We are not joining your side. We are not getting involved in your garbage and your politics, which is good. However, we were terrified that the communists would take them over, and that started to happen. So we went to containment, this concept of keep that idea where it's at. It's already in these red countries. Do not let the red spread. That's my term, not theirs, but darn, it would have been a good slogan. Don't let the red spread. And it started to spread in Korea and Vietnam, and we started panicking. They were also eyeing up Afghanistan, which if I were in the classroom, I'd point out those countries on this map. And we were really worried about Africa. So we called it I forgot to change the bottom of this. I'm sorry. We called it the domino effect. And you can see that the Viet Cong, who are Chinese-backed Vietnamese, bringing communism to Vietnam, even though most of the Vietnamese people don't want communism. We're afraid if Vietnam falls, everything else is going to fall, and they are bordering each other. And this really, really, really scared us. This was certainly a wake-up call. But how do you get two people to fight when they have enough nuclear power to destroy life on Earth 17 times over? And they have this agreement, if you destroy me, I'm killing you and everybody else. I won't lose, but no one will win. How do you deal with that? So we'll get to proxy wars in a minute. First, I want to get to peace treaties and SALT I and SALT II. The first thing I have is ICBMs are cheating. So I'll show this to you when it comes to treaty violations. The next diagram is awesome. So let's look at just the top line here, the ABMs. The ballistic missiles. And the United States had 200, the Soviet Union had we agreed to each have 200 of these missiles. But you got to cheat a little bit. So they came up with ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. You have to understand what ballistic means in order to understand how it's cheating. So the missile above, the ABM, is just one missile. Yes, I'm not a rocket scientist, so don't ask me how this works. Sorry about that. That's not your bell. That was mine. I'm not a rocket scientist. I literally don't know how this works. But somehow these rockets they'll detonate like 5 miles above the surface. I don't remember how many miles. Because think about the big ball of boom. If you get it to the ground, you don't have that much spread damage. If it detonates in the air right above the ground at like building top, you get a lot more spread damage. So somehow the rocket scientists figured out how to make that happen. With an intercontinental ballistic missile, 50 miles above the Earth's surface, your one missile turns into multiple missiles, maybe 2, 3, 4, and they go in. So the spread damage from each missile going boom is even bigger. So, yes, I got rid of my warheads, but I only have one of these ICBMs. Well, yeah, you just took 4 of them and put them into one missile. That's cheating. So, but we're not done cheating yet. So then we started counting warheads. And so SALT II, oh, by the way, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, it's called Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. So it's an agreement to get rid of these nuclear weapons. And so then we started counting warheads instead of missiles, okay. And then we also had to count nuclear submarines, which you can hide pretty easily. And that's where the SALT II and the treaty violations came from. Now, on the next lecture, because I know this one's 15 minutes, so I want to end it now, we will get into the next topic when I see you next class.